You're watching the week ahead. This is the third week of October. This forecasts some of the items that will take place in the upcoming week. We're talking about the week of October 18th until 24th. Much is going to be focused on the budget 2022, but much of the conversation also revolves on Malaysia expecting to enter the stage of endemicity, or how we treat COVID-19 as an endemic rather than a pandemic. Now, what do we know about endemicity right now? It is a situation where more restrictions that were imposed to control the spread of COVID-19 virus is expected to be loosened. And the country has lifted interstate travel because more than 91% of adults have been vaccinated. For children between 12 to 17, more than 71% of them have received at least a single dose, and about 5% of that number from 12 to 17 have received second dose. This number is, of course, expected to be dramatically improved over the next 2 to 3 weeks. My daughter, my 14-year-old daughter, for instance, is going to be one of them, where she will receive the second dose. So we're looking at a huge number of ages between 12 to 17 to receive second dose. What does this mean when it comes to Malaysian, either adults, 91% having completed their second doses, or children between 12 to 17 getting a lot of doses, second dose? It means that we're looking at Malaysia entering a stage where we have to live with COVID. The way we see Singapore being announcing the same thing a few weeks ago when Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong said that living with COVID is going to be a thing for Singapore. It's going to be the same thing for Malaysia. And to also think about what's going to happen in the upcoming week, we're also expecting Malaysia on Friday to announce our CPI, or Consumer Price Index, numbers for the month. Economists are expecting Malaysia's CPI to increase by 2.2% compared to 2.0% in August. That's something that we need to think about. Also, on Monday, which is tomorrow, Singapore will release some non-oil exports data. That's key because Malaysia and Singapore is a big trading partner. Another big trading partner to include is, of course, China. A lot of things are happening in China this week. National Bureau of Statistics of China will release its estimated third quarter GDP numbers. Other important economic indicators are expected to give an indication of the impact of the Evergrande real estate group's massive debt crisis, as well as the power crunch at the world's second largest economy, China. So those are the kind of overview that we need to look at. We now move on to our first story, which is talking a little bit more about sustainable budget. This is because Budget 2022 will lay the foundations for the government's long-term reform efforts, with sustainability to be a major priority, also COVID-19 recovery as well. Here's a glimpse of what is going to be the focus on Budget 2022.
Budget 2022 will focus on the 3 R's of speeding up recovery, strengthening economic resilience, and catalyzing reform. In the spirit of transparency, the Ministry of Finance recently introduced a pre-budget statement and 4 consultation papers, a first in our history. To date, we have received over 1,000 responses and comments, and more than ever, we are engaging and consulting with more Malaysians from all walks of life and across numerous sectors.
He added that financial assistance will remain ongoing, especially for the B40, the unemployed and the vulnerable. Additionally, Zafrul said support for businesses, including affordable financing schemes, better credit or grant access, and efforts to pivot businesses into digitalization will also be prioritized.
Last week, we saw Invest Malaysia Kuala Lumpur, or IMKL, was done. In it, we've seen the speeches by the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, Zafrul. We've heard speeches from MITI. It's all talking about how the country is trying to move forward when it comes to the recovery process of Malaysian corporates. But one area that was not touched, at least in Invest Malaysia KL, was on how SMEs are going to recover. And because of this, many SMEs are still facing cash flow problems. That's a perennial problem when it comes to SME, and it's going to be exacerbated because of the pandemic. Because of this, the AWANI Tonight team last week spoke to SME Malaysia President, Datuk Michael Kang, and see what he has to say when it comes to government urging to focus on measures to ensure the continual survivability of the folks in this sector. So here are some of the ideas that Datuk Michael is sharing when it comes to tabling the budget, particularly or especially when it comes to industries severely hit by the pandemic in the SME sector. Let's hear him out.
The most important on the budget to start and highlight, I think for 2022, government should set up a special fund, to help in terms of SME, those who have negative account. Maybe they have take loan from the bank. They have loan. They have never pay for the last 6 months or a year on their rentals. Whatever the debt they have. Government can consolidate all those debt under one account so that the SME become a term loan, so the SME can pay back later slowly with their cash flow. So when they make money, then at the same time they make their account with the bank, commercial bank, with the clean account, so that they can take the additional working capital from the commercial bank. And also government can provide some soft loan, which is a special interest rate, so that they can jumpstart their business.
So in Invest Malaysia Kuala Lumpur that happened last week, there was a mega panel by government-linked investment companies that was moderated by the CEO of Bursa Malaysia, Datuk Umar Swift. There was the Managing Director of Khazanah, there was the CEO and President of PNB. But one speech that came from the Chief Investment Officer of EPF was actually quite crucial. In it, she says that Malaysia will face a financial issue when it comes to retirement. Many Malaysians will face a crisis because a lot of the savings that was saved up under Account 1 and Account 2 of EPF is mostly depleted. So because of this, the AWANI Tonight team last week spoke to a spokesperson from Khazanah Research Institute, Nur Suraya Sazali, to break down the scenario of what is happening right now and what needs to be done. Here are some of the focus areas that will come in the upcoming week that we need to think about on how the budget 2022 is going to marry with the retirement crisis that the country is obviously going to face in the years to come. Let's hear her out.
We have seen like two major problems. Number one, most of our populations aged 15 to 64, at about 60% of us who age 15 to 64 don't even have formal retirement savings. That's number one. And number two, when we do have retirement saving, usually it's like with the Employees Provident Fund, which is EPF, we don't even have enough. In 2020, they reported that their members aged about like 54, most of them don't even have 20,000 ringgit in their accounts, which translates into about like 200 ringgit per month for 20 years. So like what can you get for 200 ringgit, right? That's before, COVID. Before COVID happens. When COVID happens, we all know this, the withdrawal schemes, iLestari, iSina, and iCitra. Those who access the scheme typically are those who need the money the most, number one. And number two, they are most vulnerable of having limited retirement savings.
Suraya suggested establishing a social insurance pension for the old age to provide basic income security for the elderly, given coverage and adequacy challenges of old age savings.
Social pension is essentially state transfer or government transfer to population above certain age. And then this transfer has to be regular. So typically it's a lifetime. So a monthly quote-unquote benefit for a lifetime. And then we do have this in Malaysia. We have this under the Bantuan Warga Emas, BOT, previously known as Bantu Orang Tua, and we also have it for civil service pensions. So in Malaysia, it's exclusive to the two extreme groups, right? And leaving the middle, we call it as a missing middles, which we have to rely, we have to rely on our EPF savings, and we know that EPF saving is not pension, it's a lump sum savings.
Also, the government has reactivated the Malaysia Social Protection Council, or MySPC, last year with the aim of improving the social security for every one of us. Nur Suraya was talking about how this can be further enhanced.
I would like to see from my SPC in particular a concrete move forwards. Any program or any policy that is introduced later on to have a proper legal backing. Because a program without a legal backing can be retracted, can be withdrawn anytime. So we need that. We need a legal shelter to a certain program. And if that is difficult, if that is not achievable in the short term, then whatever it is that they want to propose, my SPC with regard to old age income security, I at least want them to I at least want to see a pilot study. Start with something small, like try it out in certain locality. It could be a state, it could be a district. Whatever model that we want to introduce, so that we can monitor and we can also evaluate the effectiveness before we implement it nationwide.
We'll see if all this is going to be implemented in budget 2022. We'll also see if the executive is going to introduce this in the conversations that will take place on the week of October 18th. But for now, we go for a short break. Welcome back to the week ahead. We're broadcasting this live. We want to also harken back to what we started off with, which is October 18th will be the endemicity treatment of COVID-19 for Malaysia. Because of this, regular testing is going to be the norm, and we have to normalize this. So therefore, while we understand how this will be the way of life for all of us, we need to learn on how we can conduct proper self-testing. Professor Dr. Sharifah Izzat of UKM Medical Center actually gives up some of the ideas that she want to share with us, and the team at Astro AWANI spoke to her on what needs to be understood when it comes to normalizing self-testing and making it a part of us or a way of life. Let's hear her out.
If you feel that you are exposed and you feel that you might have symptoms, or you have just met a lot of people and you might be exposed to the virus, you may be asymptomatic and you feel that you might be a carrier, then you need to self-test. Another potential area where you need to self-test regularly is when you feel that you, let's say you might work, you need to go into a working environment and you are worried that you might carry the virus, so then you also need to self-test. So when is the best time to self-test is basically early in the morning. But basically you test yourself when you think that you might be exposed or you might be vulnerable to contracting the virus, and also to prevent yourself from transmitting to other people.
Dr. Sharifah explained how in some cases, a false negative whereby a person is positive for COVID but still shows a negative result might happen during the virus's incubation period. It is recommended for the person to repeat testing or go for RT-PCR tests.
So you can give yourself some grace period, let's say 3 days, before you actually test yourself. If you test yourself and you are negative and you don't have any symptoms and things like that, in a way it's considered something that you might actually be recommended to repeat after another 3 days, or you might be advisable to actually seek another advice or another result using the PCR, which is the confirmatory test.
Dr. Sharifah stressed that it is everyone's responsibility to self-test, especially now that interstate travel is allowed.
At the moment, the government advise everybody or recommend everybody to go or basically do self-testing, because it's not practical for us to check everyone who require to go for interstate travel. Now, this leeway would create a lot of potential areas where smaller outbreaks may occur. So basically, we don't want to ruin our government and to ruin our future. So please do self-test as part of your responsible ownership of not only your health but other people's health as well.
The government has also placed cap limit of how self-test is going to be administered and sold to us. So do keep an eye out for any merchants that are selling over the cap limit of those prices. We'll go for one more short break before we conclude our show the week ahead. Welcome back to the week ahead, broadcasting to you live. In case you missed it, the Wildlife Conservation Act 2010 was tabled to be amended, and what needs to be thought about in the upcoming week is on how the amendments are going to impact Malaysian wildlife. Because of this, our team at Astro spoke to Dr. Nur Arlina Ahmad on how these provisions that is contained in the amendment is going to make it easier for authorities to prosecute offenders.
It should make like the enforcement authorities work a lot easier, because oftentimes you can see that when people are promoting wildlife, say on social media, so it's really hard to sort of prosecute them, because first off, they don't have the animal with them. So by having these new provisions, we can prosecute them under this particular provision for promoting wildlife. Yeah, so that I think on the enforcement side of things, that makes their job a lot easier.
On Monday, Energy and Natural Resources Ministry tabled two new provisions, Section 88A and 88B, to allow punishments for those who organize wildlife shows and promote wildlife. Arlina said Section 88B of the bill, which highlights promoting any wildlife or its derivatives for business as an offence, will increase public awareness of the illicit activity and hopefully decreases demand in the market.
This would be very helpful if, say, if I don't have like a business, for example, but I have wildlife and I'm promoting it, say, on my TikTok account. So that would be an offence. Yeah, so that is the one thing that the general public should know, is that you don't just have to like have wildlife with you. Promoting them is also an offence.
She added that raising awareness on the Wildlife Conservation Act 2010, or known as WCA, and its offences is essential to protect wildlife and endangered species in Peninsular Malaysia. Laws pertaining wildlife in Sabah and Sarawak are separate, where the WCA cannot supersede the two statutes despite being a federal legislation.
One item that we need to keep an eye out for when it comes to budget 2022 is one that talks about gender responsive budget, one that highlights the specific needs of men, women, boys, and girls. Because of this and recognizing the need for this, Wanita PKR came up with a national gender action plan to address the gap to make our budget a little bit more gender responsive. Speaking about this is the chief, Wanita PKR chief, Yang Muhammad Fuziah Salleh, talking about the importance on the government putting a better lens or gender lens when it comes to drafting the upcoming budget.
A gender responsive budget is important because it enables the study of the impact of the budget on men and women, boys and girls. So you see, usually we just give out the budget, but we don't study the impact. So it's important in the gender responsive budget. This is very important to study the impact, to do the analysis, to monitor, and finally to come up with a suggestion or a policy on how men and women can have equitable access to resources.
Fuziah stressed how the current budget focused more on outcomes rather than the specific needs of each gender. She gave an example of domestic violence cases that were on the rise during the pandemic.
If we look at the pandemic, we can see that women suffer more during the pandemic. For example, we know that the number of domestic violence cases went up a few times, during the pandemic, and who are the ones who suffer most during due to this, and are we making sure that there is resources that is being given out, distributed for this very specific purpose. During the pandemic, we are so busy with our hospitals dealing with COVID, and this is, we are gender blind when it comes to dealing with COVID cases. However, when domestic violence victims come to OSCC, a one-stop crisis center in hospitals, there are COVID hospitals, then they don't get shelters because they are not allowed to get shelters there. And where do they go? And everybody is all locked up, and finally they go back to the perpetrators. So you see, when you apply the gender lens, then you may be able to allocate some budget.
So when YB Fuziah came on agenda AWANI on Astro AWANI, she also talked about the efficiency for data collection to be done. She's talking about an efficient data collection system to be as the first step in addressing the gender responsive budget. And this is to better allow targeted solution, targeted address of the gap to be done. Here she is talking about the matter.
Moving forward, we do need to collect our data differently. We do need to have a disaggregated data, and we do need to highlight the different needs of the head of households. Male head of households and female head of households have different needs. Therefore, we do need to allocate the budget in response to those needs. For example, if I want to find out about single mothers just now, I've got to go to e-Kasih, and I've got to go to Zakat, I've got to go to JKM, I've got to go to schools to know whether they have single mothers there in their database. I need to go where? I need to go to KRT. There's so many agencies that I need to go to collect all those data. Our data is all over the place, as I said earlier. So we need to correct this, and we need to approach it differently. The Prime Minister talked about gender equality as the way forward for the 12th Malaysia Plan. If we apply gender responsive budgeting correctly, we should be able to correct our policies, have better policies with regards to gender mainstreaming, and hopefully we will change our course with regards to the gender equality gap, because we are now very low down.
So tell me what you think about the gender responsive budget. You can tweet directly at me at Ibrahim Saninet. Let me know your thoughts, your opinions, your ideas about this, and whether or not you agree or disagree with what YB Fuziah is championing right now. You can also use the hashtag Belanjawan2022 or Belanjawan Awani as some of the hashtags, because we're going to be monitoring these kind of hashtags moving into budget 2022. Remember, this is going to be a recovery budget. It's going to be yet another stimulus program. It's going to be a continuation of what not just this administration, but what the previous administration is doing. The question now is whether or not it is enough. So those are the kind of items that you need to think about when you think about the week ahead. So that's it for this particular show. I hope you do enjoy what we have offered right now, and I do wish you all the best in the week ahead. My name is Ibrahim Sani. Catch you in the next one.